Good afternoon. How is everybody?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Hold 1 second. I've got a phone call here. Let me. All right. Well, let's get started tonight. I don't want to take up your time here on personal calls. I've got a workman at the house. So this week's stars. Let's see. I liked. Let's look at our weekly schedule. And let me share my screen. Let me move that out of my way so I can see. Go back to the proper one here. All right. So this is week number 7. We're working on discipline this week, student conduct. Next week, remember, we have no class. In the week following, we'll present case study 3. I'll talk about it in a minute. So looking at, I really like Sharon's answer to number 5. Again, you can go into discussion board and read these if Sharon with us. She did an excellent job. Hers was well developed. And so that's the notes that I read about it. She kind of walked through the steps, due process, which was good. On case study 6, activity 6, which we hadn't got to, field trip. Michelle's was well documented. She documented hers real well on what you would do. So if you want to see a really well documented one, you can look at Michelle's. If all these people are with us or not. And then there's Michelle. She was on the other screen. And then I want to call on Daniel to talk just a minute about his number 6. His had a little different take on the liability issue of a field trip. So, Daniel, if you would.
Oh man, nothing like being put on the spot. So just my take was a little different just because I wanted people to be aware that there's a related service part of special education services for children who are blind or visually impaired, and that's called orientation and mobility. And the reason I'm aware of this is because I am a certified orientation and mobility specialist. So my training is I went to university to work with children who are visually impaired, and this training it teaches children how to use long white canes to get around their schools. And the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, requires that instruction also be accorded to students in the home and community environments. So, and where I work in Wake County Public Schools, we take kids out of school with parent permission to do community-based instruction. So we are teaching kids how to cross streets, how to access grocery stores, how to access public transportation. And I've run into situations before in the past where administrators who are not knowledgeable and they're trying to prevent these kids from going off campus, saying you can't take these kids off campus. That's not part of the that's not part of their education. I haven't approved it, and you have to go back and inform them about IDEA and that it is part of their education as part of their IEPs. So it sometimes takes a little bit of education of the administrators as well in the school districts about what is orientation mobility, and that it is a service accorded to children with visual impairments. So it can't be something that can be prohibited. You do need to make sure you have the safeguards in place, that there's parent permissions that have been signed, and that your school district somehow you have liability coverage on this. I carry multiple $1 million liability coverage just for taking these kids off campus. And I know that probably better. I know that liability is huge. I know that better probably in administrators, because I had a colleague of mine in Minnesota who was killed in the line of duty with his student. They were standing on a sidewalk, and a car slid on a patchy ice road and slid off the road onto the sidewalk and killed both the instructor and the child. So it is a huge liability. My liability insurance is actually higher than my wife's, and she's a cardiac critical care nurse. So it's but it's something that has to be done. So
Thank you, Daniel. And so the notion here, I'll stop my share because we're is anytime you transport kids, anytime outside of bell ring, go to class, bell ring, go to next class, there's huge liability. You've got to understand again, misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance, and that you are personally liable if you should have done something and just didn't, or you did the wrong thing, or you intentionally did the wrong thing. You got to understand. And Daniel's expanded our view of sometimes we have to do things that are a little bit out of the norm, but that's part of their IEP, or that's part of their schooling, and we have to do that. And so you need, as Daniel said, you need to protect yourself. You need to get your own insurance in that case, because anybody can sue for any reason at any time. That's what this is about. The whole notion is yeah, find out about field trips because it's the most common, the biggest liability issue. But there are others as well. You need to understand negligence. You need to understand to protect yourself, especially when you're an administrator, from every sleep that's coming down the pipe. But you never know what situation you're going to be in. And as Daniel said, you just can't say, well, we just won't have any field trips. But that's part of their IEP. You're going to have field trips. You're going to leave campus. You're going to have students who in high school who leave for different reasons for CTE, for career and technical education. You're going to have a lot of that. You're going to have a lot of coming and going to and fro. Whether you're there with it or not, you better have it planned and prepared. You better have rules. You better have protocols in place. You better make sure, because because you're going to be the first in the line of fire when something goes bad. Dr. Griffin Jordan, you're a high school principal. Tell them.
Okay, so before anything, you need to make sure parents know, don't take a student off your campus unless you have a signed agreement, a permission form from the parent saying that it is okay. Make sure you have that. You also need to have a copy, because along with that permission slip is going to be a medical form. If you get them somewhere down at the park and somebody has a seizure and you have no idea what to do, you can say bye-bye to your school, your job, especially if something happens to that student. If you don't have the parents' knowledge that they're there, and that you don't have the medical form that lets you know that the parent has given you permission to do whatever you need to do medically. So please make sure that that is all in place every time you step foot. Even if you're going on a walking tour, you know, down to the local park, if you step foot off of your campus, make sure you have that documentation in hand.
Excellent. Now I'm going to say this. Now don't. I always tell people, as long as you quote me correctly, I don't have a problem. I am not complaining. I'm not being a grumpy old man, although I am a grumpy old man. But now you all know that children have many more medical issues today than, say, 60 years ago when I was in school. Allergies, bee stings, peanuts, everything in the world, eggs. Now, listen, this is the important part of that. If that happened to them at school, you might be okay. And you say, well, Dale, what's the difference? But if you've got them on a field trip and it happens, oh my God, the liability ramps up. It's like all of a sudden, you know, you're going to be examined. Everything you did every minute from the time you got up that morning is going to be examined, looking for a loophole to persecute you, to get money out of you over this tragedy. And so while if a kid's sitting in second period and he falls out with a seizure because he's got a peanut allergy, you know, that's going to be bad. But if they're on a field trip, it's exponential. So you got to understand that anytime you take a kid off campus, you've got two levels of issues there that you better make sure you're planning prepared. Dion, you got a question? Go right ahead.
Okay, Dr. Lamb, you're familiar with my school campus because you've been there.
Yes.
So, you know, we don't have an auditorium. So
right.
When we're having school assemblies, we take them around to Smith, which, you know, is right there by us.
Yeah.
So I was listening to what Dr. Griffin Jordan was saying.
Yeah,
So we do set foot off campus and take them there. But I was just wondering for clarity, do we need a field trip thing for that? Since it's a school assembly, it's just that we don't have that facility available to us on our campus. So we use the one at the neighboring school.
So I can tell you what we do. We don't have, we're similar. Our school doesn't have athletic facilities. We're by Duke University and the Duke Regional Park or field. Sometimes our PE teacher will take his kids across the street, down the road, you know, walking distance to the field. Yes, it's approved and everything's good, but I've told him at the beginning of each semester, you send that blanket permission slip home to parents saying, occasionally we will go, you know, if you have the exact dates, you know, every Friday from here until December, we were going to go across the street for physical activity. Of course, on the permission form, you have to explain what you're doing and it has to be educational related. So it will be, but I always, you can do that if it's going to be multiple times, give a blanket form and let the parents sign giving you permission to take their child off down the street. Even if it's another school, if they're leaving campus, I would just personally, it won't hurt. Everything, you know, just needs to be documented these days. As Dr. Lamb mentioned, people are just waiting for you to mess up so that they can get some money. So that will be the biggest thing of, go ahead.
We were going to notify the parents that our assemblies were going to be held at Smith High School because of the fact that we don't have it on our facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So we were planning on notifying them, but I didn't know if like, we're planning on doing it twice a year, like at the beginning of each semester, you know, to have all of our school together so we can set the tone for, you know, the upcoming part of the year. So that's why I was just wondering when you said, take them off campus. I'm like, well, technically we are taking them off campus because we're going
How
to
are
the
you
other
notifying parents?
We're going to send home a letter and we're then going to get, of course, we send home for field trips, like when they're going to a college or like you said, even walking and going, when they did their senior walks, we sent home field trips, permission slips for that, even though they were doing that as part of the county initiative and all of that. So for everything else, we were just thinking because it's a school assembly, and it's just a matter of us not having the space on our campus, that we would just let parents know for those two occasions, we will be taking them to Smith to have our
I
assembly.
would have it, and I would put, you know, on that permission form, these two occasions they'll be going, and have them to sign it and just keep it with you.
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because of what you said. Thanks again.
yeah, and that's a great question because to go from her school to Smith, they have to get on public sidewalks or streets.
Exactly.
So
Oh, no, we don't walk them. No. We put them on a bus.
but I mean, you got to go.
Yeah,
you got to get on a public street. Either that's what I'm talking about. You either got to
we don't
walk them on
walk
a sidewalk or drive them on a public street. Anytime you leave the physical confines of your campus, whether you're walking or riding, sidewalk or street, it doesn't matter. If you leave your physical confines and get on a public, what they call a public conveyance, sidewalk or street, you need a form. That's the law. I know that one. Unfortunately, I know that one.
And hopefully you'll never need it, but don't ever not have it. Just
exactly.
Yeah.
In Charlotte-Mecklenburg, we have some tri-campuses, I guess is what we used to refer to them. They probably put a more modern name like villages on them now, where we have a high school, a middle school, and an elementary school. And one, we've got two elementaries. They're like a triangle. Now the one up at the university, it's a square because it's got two elementaries, a middle and a high school. And they have kind of a shared campus, but because of the fencing between them, you still got to go around the public street. And even though it's on the same campus, when they bring the middle school kids up to the high school, they need a form, unfortunately, because they have to use the public Brown Greer Road up to Sandy Porter, even though it would be easier to walk, but there's fencing around the fields, obviously. And so even on a shared campus, because they're on a public conveyance, again, I've learned this one the hard way, you better have that signed form. I know that sounds crazy. I know it's hard, but you got to do that. North Mech, they had to cross a public road to get to Trailer Village. That was a liability nightmare. They had a trailer city at North Mech before Hopewell was built back in the day when they had 3,500 kids and the building was built for 15. They had more kids in trailers than they had on campus. Not good. Owen said. Dr. Griffin Jordan, if you'll go ahead and get started with your presentation, I'm going to I'm going to turn off my video and let you share and we'll get started. So that kind of summarizes that, folks. So tonight's presentation is on discipline. Dr. Griffin Jordan, I'll let her go ahead and get started.
All righty. Let's see. Okay. All right, so this evening, we're going to talk about student rights and student discipline along with due process. This is something that as an administrator, no matter what school you work in, you're going to have to deal with. Hopefully not to drastic measures, but to some degree, you're going to have to deal with this. So we're going to jump right in. I have a lot to share, but I am going to keep a track of the time so we don't go over. You're going to get an overview of the laws and processes and policies as they relate to student rights and due process in your school and how to handle some things. All right. So it's important to know that the discipline policies that you're following in your school that are already put in place are not just made up. You know, you didn't have a few people sitting around the table just deciding this is what we're going to do at this school. They're actually derived from a trickle-down process from the state, the entire state. So aside from any federal type laws that may apply, which supersedes everything, your North Carolina, if you're in North Carolina, it's the North Carolina State Board of Education. They have a board policy manual. So this manual sets the policies and general procedures for public school systems, all the public school systems in the state of North Carolina. And on this page, this is a loaded page, I have the hyperlinks where you can click on at a later time each of these documents that I'm referring to. So you have that State Board of Education board policy manual at the top. We're going to review that a little bit, and then we'll look at the North Carolina Discipline Data Reporting and Procedures Manual. So we use this for reporting data for the school year, any type of discipline data and alternative learning program roster data. So all of this information it includes Power School information and details on what type of discipline should be reported, different types of ways, everything like that is in this manual. This is what is made by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So we have the State Board of Education, and then we have the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. And then we look down further. I use my district, Durham Public Schools. From there, we have the board policies. So each LEA, or local education administration, has their own board policies. So your local Board of Education creates board policies from the policies set by the state. What they also do after they sit down and create the board policies, the Board of Education, then your district leadership team will create the code of conduct to enforce the policy set from the board. So you're seeing how everything starts at the state, then goes to DPI, then goes to each of the districts. They put together their code of conduct and post it in their student and family handbook. And then it trickles on down further to your local schools. So then you have each of your schools, they'll have a student and family handbook, student code of conduct book, or whatever you want to have. Every school should have one of these. And the policies in each of these documents should be a trickle down from the state board policy manual. So we're going to look, let's see. Let's go to, okay, so I'm hoping you're seeing this. I tried to switch screens. This is the North Carolina State Board of Education Policy Manual. This is massive. It starts up with A's and it goes all the way down. Everything that you can possibly imagine that the State Board of Education will need to regulate. You look in here on the left side, driver's education, dropouts, exceptional children, graduation requirements, everything that they can possibly manage is in this document, this very massive document. So let's look at here. This says, this is SBE, State Board of Education / DPI, Department of Public Instruction, operation. And this gives, I'm going to go right here to the standards of conduct for North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Hoping you can still see this. This is the policy manual for the standards of conduct for the public schools in North Carolina. They list out, these are the standards. Demonstrate highest standard of personal integrity, truthfulness, honesty, etc. Avoid any actions or activities that are in conflict or may be in conflict with the responsibility always to act in the best educational interest of children, and so forth. So they provide standards. So from this document, we're going to go to the North Carolina Discipline Data Reporting and Policies Manual. And as you can see, this is derived from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. So we're taking information from that massive state Board of Education policy manual, and now we're trickling it down to the Department of Public Instruction for the state of North Carolina. So within this document, you can see this is a very inclusive document. It gives you step-by-step information on how to report discipline infractions, when to report, what to report. Everything is right here. We've talked about some offenses that must be reported. These are the ones that we've indicated that could get you in trouble if there are too many at your school. These are going to be the ones that will have your school labeled persistently dangerous school. You don't want to be a persistently dangerous school, but these are the ones. Everything is listed. We don't make things up. Nobody makes things up. We get things like this from the state. And so what you see in your district manuals, some of this you might even say, okay, this looks familiar. A lot of the things I put in my school's code of conduct, my student code of conduct, is cut and paste. I cut and paste, and at the very bottom I put retrieved from the State Board of Education or retrieved from NCDPI code of conduct or something like that. Because everybody needs to know what the rules are, what the policies are, and everyone must follow them.
Dr. Griffin Jordan, pardon me, minor. Can you roll back up a couple pages? I want to point out one thing as well.
Okay.
one more. Whoa, let's see if it's, yeah, there, one more. All right,
Right,
up
where?
one,
Up
one.
one.
Whoa,
Okay,
not only is everything documented in terms of the state, from the General Assembly, the State Board of Education, Department of Public Instruction, but please realize as well, discipline data reporting is a federal requirement. See it right here on the screen, Office of Civil Rights Data Collection. Since 2014, this is a federal requirement as well. Guess what happens? I told you, if you misspend federal money or break federal law, how many times do you get to do that? Once. So you might could break state law and get reprimanded or demoted or something, but that's not the way it works for federal law. So you got to understand, Dr. Griffin Jordan is developing the rationale from state law, from the General Assembly to the State Board of Education to the Department of Public Instruction, but the enforcement arm of this is the federal government as well. Don't forget that part. Thank you. I'm sorry for interrupting you.
oh, no problem at all, anytime. And if you all have questions as we're going along, I might not be able to see. Let me look at the chat. Okay, that was you, Dr. Lamb. Okay, I can't always see the chat. Okay. So let's see. There's one other thing I wanted to go through. Okay, so this document, of course, it tells you the types of incidents that must be reported. It'll tell you how to report them. This right here, entering incidents in Power School. This tells you how to enter. Everybody deals with Power School. Everybody deals in North Carolina, you deal with Power School. This document tells you how to enter the incidents in Power School. There are system rules, there are required fields. And if you look at some of these required fields, very specific. The incident date, the time, the location, the description, who was the offender, what was the behavior, what was the action. You have to have all of these details when you are reporting an incident. You can't say it happened sometime on campus, I'm not really sure. So we'll talk a little bit about how to make sure you get all this, but this is not an option. You have to have these. And if you have Educator's Handbook, this is the third-party vendor that pushes everything after you finish an Educator's Handbook. It pushes everything into Power School. You have to export it. We have to do that on a weekly basis. So every Friday before we leave the campus, unless it's a very serious incident, but just like just basic disruptions, we'll make sure everything is cleaned out by the end of the week and exported into Power School. If it's serious, if it's a fight or something serious, it needs to be done immediately from Educator Handbook to Power School.
Let
Okay,
me
so
make a point there, again, an
okay.
interruption. I get this question a lot. We use Educator's Handbook. Do we have to, does that mean we don't have to use Power School? No, you just heard Dr. Griffin Jordan say, you've got to export it from Educator's Handbook to Power School. But here's my point. It doesn't matter. You can't blame a third-party software vendor like Educator Handbook. It has to be right in Power School. So this notion, well, we put it in right and it just got wrong, and no, you got to go back then and double check it in Power School to make sure it's been entered correctly by the rules of this manual. Using a third-party software is not an excuse if it was not reported completely accurately or truthfully. That's the standard. And so I have way too many people who think, well, you know, as long as we get it here, no, you got to double check that part as well. Make sure you understand if you're in a district, that's an extra layer. Not all districts use third party. Some districts go straight to Power School. In the end, you're responsible for what goes in Power School, and you cannot blame your third-party software. Learned that one in court as well.
And to give an example, Dr. Lamb, Educator Handbook is wonderful, but Educator Handbook may not know your schedule, especially like my school, we're different than the traditional school schedule. So let's say, for instance, the district sets up educator's handbook to leave out when you're doing a 5-day suspension, to leave out Friday because Friday's a teacher work day. But for my schedule, it might not be. We might be in school. So if I don't go back and check, those 5 days might be Thursday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, as opposed to Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So everything is off now because I didn't go back to check to make sure that I would have to input by hand the fact that we're going to be in school Friday, and that needs to be 1 day counted as a suspension. So that is perfect example. Educator handbook will pre-populate all these, what you're seeing here, the school, the incident, location. You can't complete your write-up unless you enter all these factors within your incident report. But you have to go back because it's a machine. It could be wrong. So please don't think that that's going to save you if it's put in the information is put in wrong.
And if there's any documentation that's inaccurate on appeal, it will be kicked, by the way. Something as simple as the wrong days, like Dr. Griffin Jordan just pointed out, the wrong days, no, that kicks it on appeal. So you got to understand that you got to get it right. I'm so old that I learned this lesson on, none of you will know what I'm talking about. Swiss was the first third-party vendor, like Educator Handbook was Swiss, and unfortunately learned that lesson when Swiss didn't download completely. It left a lot of minor incidents if they didn't get, Swiss had some kind of a default in it, and they didn't report incidents if they got less than a certain consequence. Now remember, this manual does not spell out what consequence a student gets. That's in your code of conduct. You have to use this for how to report. But now when you talk about, well, this kid was fighting, what penalty does he get? What's the consequence for fighting? The state manual does not do that. That comes from your code of conduct. Now, some third-party software has a default set up where it doesn't transfer what they consider to be minor infractions. But you can read this handbook from front to back. Nowhere in there will it say anything about major or minor. It says all. But Swiss is set up, or used to be set up, on a major minor, and it wouldn't transfer the minor. And if you didn't go back and put them in by hand or notice that, they didn't get in. And that became a big problem. And so you're responsible for PowerSchool. If your district uses a third-party software vendor like Educator Handbook or Swiss, there's a couple more, that does not absolve you of the responsibility for it to be correct. And on appeal, if anything is not exactly there, there's going to be trouble.
Exactly. Yes, thank you. So something that doesn't happen automatically is the end of year PowerSchool data storage. So I recently had to do this. This is your final approval of discipline data that is sent from the school to the district and from the district to the state. And then the state reports it. And then we'll see all the results for all the schools next year of how discipline was, how the discipline went for each school. And this is how they're going to determine if you're a persistently dangerous school, if you're great, all of that. I had to do this not long ago. One thing, and it's a report, and I have to go into PowerSchool, not Educator Handbook or anything else. I have to go into PowerSchool, into reports, and approve my discipline data for the year. The form that I was sent, I ended up calling my district person over discipline to ask because it said long-term suspension 1. And so I'm like, okay, so, and I'm still learning, we all learn. So I was like, so why is there 1? Because there was another. So she explained to me, which totally makes sense, that one student went to Lakeview, which is an alternative school. So once they have an alternative schooling placement, as long as they go within that 10 days of suspension, and they went after they got suspended a couple of days, they're in another learning environment. So it's not long-term suspended. It was an administrative transfer, technically, even though they were long-term from my school, they still received their education. So it was not considered a long-term suspension going forward to the state because they were not out of school for a long-term period of time, more than 10 days. So the one that student actually refused to go to the alternative school. Mom kept her home, and she ended up appealing, and she was allowed to go to her base school. We're a specialty school. So she was out of school, I think, in a few weeks. Long story short, she was out of school more than 10 days. She missed more than 10 days of school. It was considered a long-term suspension because she was out of school with no service, no education for 11 plus days. So that's the one that ended up staying as a long-term suspension. And I think it was 20 some days total. So that's something to keep in mind. Long-term suspension does not mean a whole full year. It's more than 10 days. And also, if they go to an alternative placement and they're still getting their education every day within that 10 days, then it's not considered a long-term suspension. So that's—
Can I
Yes.
ask a question? Okay, so I'm hearing you say, like, if they're out for 10 days and if they go to alternative place, as long as they're receiving an education. So would that count with the, like the hybrid thing? Because, like, I know we have it where, we have a Google, we can turn on our Google Meet link during class. And would that count as a non-long-term suspension if they are coming, logging into Google Meet, and although they're not physically in class, they're on Google Meet and doing the work?
Right. As it was explained to me, if they're getting educational services, whether it's at an alternative school, whether it's online, because we were all online at one point, so that still constitutes as you're receiving your education. The long-term suspension comes in when you're out of school and you're not receiving any educational services.
Now, Dr. Griffin Jordan is exactly right, and there's no but coming. She's exactly right. Now, pay attention to the legislative sessions this summer, the short sessions, because some of these things change from year to year. There was a time when what she just said was not the case. Unless you were registered as an alternative school, it didn't count as an alternative placement. But during COVID, they took the restrictions off. It didn't care how you got there. If you listened on a Dixie cup and string, they counted it. That's the rules right now, but that's going to be revisited before next year. So that may change, but she's exactly right. For the last 3 years, any way you got any kind of instruction counted. But now normally it's not always that way. You have to be set up as an alternative program. Those rules may revert back for next year. They've already talking about, we talked earlier about the percentages. The percentages on what counted towards your final grade kind of went out the window during COVID as well. But those have already come back in place, by the way. They've already been reestablished. This may be revisited as well going forward, that unless you are registered with the state as an alternative, it's not going to count as attendance. But right now, she's absolutely right. At the end of your report this year, it did count as attendance. And so if you were listening, or if you were on Zoom, or any way that you got anything, they counted that. But that is not normal, and we may return back to normal. So that's one of the things that if you take a job this coming year, you better ask right away, is how's this going to be counted? Have the rules reverted back to the previous iteration before COVID?
You're absolutely right. I'm thinking they will revert back as well. Honestly, I'd love for them to revert back because during COVID, our teachers, we were trained to put everything on campus. Everything has to be on campus. And when we return back to school, everything is still on campus because our schools are one-to-one now. Every student has a device, everything on campus. Students, and I might have said it before, students they're smart. They go home and they don't come for a couple of days, but they go on campus and do the work and submit the work. So it's like you're grading for mastery. So apparently they've mastered the content, but they're not coming to school. So it's like, you know, we need them in school. We need them in school. So policies now are being developed where, you know, we're trying to get a little bit more strict with that, you know, being absent if it's unexcused versus, you know, excused absences. Another thing that our district is doing that, again, will likely at some point change is for short-term suspensions, there's an option of restorative practices in-house or online. So if it's restorative practices online at home, that means they're still counted as an in-school suspension. It's not counted as an out-of-school suspension, but they are online restorative practices at home. So that's something that we've done. We started that last year. That possibly will change as well. I'm not sure, but yeah, as Dr. Lamb said, just continue to keep a track year to year because we are in a transitional time. I think a lot of things are going to change, not just this, but the way our state's going. Just look at the news and just stay abreast of everything.
I've got a question for everybody. So let's put our school finance hats on for a second. When Dr. Griffin Jordan said, we really need these students to come back to school, even though they might be mastering the content online, when she said, we really need these students to come back to school, thinking with your school finance hat on, why do we need these students to come back to school if they're mastering the content online, but they're being absent? How do schools get funded? There we go. Stephanie, attendance equals money. Yay. Yay. You get paid for the ones that come, not the ones on the roll. Remember that. So when she said, we really need these students to come back to school, she meant they really need them to come back to school. Otherwise, they don't get paid. So that's why. It's not, you know, cause I said so kind of thing, or I'm the boss of you. It's because every day that they're absent, the state does not send the money for them that day. That's why she really needs it. And all districts really need kids to come back to school. Okay, excellent.
All right. Last thing here, I mentioned the final approval for your EOY. And then using state discipline reports to verify the accuracy of the data and to monitor trends in the discipline data. So as I mentioned, everything that is captured and reported to the state will be available, all this discipline data. You'll see it on your NC report card. You'll see it several places the following year. So what was just reported for my school, you're going to be seeing that pretty soon. So just keep that in mind that at the end of every year, you're going to have to verify the data for the whole school year. So you're going to have to keep up and know when you hit approve, you need to know everything that's up there. You should be able to think back to the specific students that the data is referring to. All right, so we're moving on. So that's the DPI's version. So now we're going to go to, this is Durham Public Schools. This is their board policy. And we're looking here at this Code of Student Conduct. I just pulled up for middle and high school students. So this is where we take what the state has and DPI has put in place, and your district is going to come up with the code of conduct for the whole district. Here you have student code of conduct rules are leveled, indicating the severity of each. You have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and level 5 is the most severe. Minor infractions, of course, go to level 1. As Dr. Lamb has discussed before, the minimal, if you get a level 1, you can't suspend them for 10 days. You need to know the policy. So that's going to be a red flag if you have a student and they have a level 1 suspension and you suspend them for 10 days for, I don't know, saying a cuss word in class and walking out. Level 1, yes, but not worth the 10-day suspension. You're going to have to know how to look at this policy and devise your plan for your school, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is the whole, this talks about the rules. This is level 2. You have the rules 1, 2, 3. Here we are talking about bullying and harassment, sexual assault. These are their policies. No student shall engage in bullying and harassment. No student shall engage in any sexual assault, etc. I am participating in my district's leadership retreat actually this week. They have a whole section on Title IX. There little bits of changes coming on with Title IX. So much that the district is telling principals, don't handle it yourself. Even if it's something you're not sure of, don't investigate. Somebody said, you know, she was in the bathroom and she did something to me and I'm coming to tell you, you don't sit there and say, okay, let me go get your witness statement. You tell me. No, they're telling us immediately any type of Title IX offense that could be, I need for you to get on the phone and call us, call the district's Title IX department and let them take it and they will advise us. So we are not dealing with anything that deals with sexual harassment or sexual assault of any kind. So their phones hopefully, you know, doesn't ring off the hook, but they've taken that completely off of our hands. That's how sticky it's getting right now with Title IX.
Well, again, was it last week or week before, I've got the Title IX update. And as we pointed out to you a couple of weeks ago, Title IX has changed. Now, it changed in 2021 and went into effect in 2022. It was kind of iffy because of COVID not being in school, but it's in full effect now. And what that means is what Dr. Griffin Jordan is telling you is the person who makes the ultimate decision on the disciplinary action cannot be the person who investigates anymore. That's why they're telling them that's your job to assign the discipline. So you can't, by the new Title IX law, you can't be the one that investigates, period. That's not you. I've advised that for the last 12 or 13 years that I've been doing this, that from my experiences dealing with it at the district level, don't do that because the police will throw you under the bus if you mess up their investigation. But now it is law. It's not Dale's opinion. Since 2021, it is law. You do not investigate Title IX. That is not you. The law prohibits you from doing that now. So you got, again, all these things you've got to know, but your district should be giving you good guidance on these. But if you don't know, you need to ask somebody. Who was it? Snoop Dogg said, you better ask somebody. Well, that's what you better do on this one. You better ask somebody.
It was Biggie. Okay. All right, so we're gonna move on. So that was the district's code of conduct. Now the district, each LEA is gonna also, they're gonna take their code of conducts and they're gonna put together a handbook for students and family. And what's gonna go in that handbook? That student code of conduct. Let's see. You scroll all the way down. Well, I saw sexual harassment. They have a whole section right there. Talks about employees and students. But this is the student and family handbook. And here we go. Give us a matrix. So we've seen the code of conduct. We've seen the policies at the state level. We've seen the LEA create the code of conduct. And now each school will be able to give their families the handbook from the district, which is very comprehensive. So from there, each of your schools will give their students a very specific school-related handbook. And of course, the very first thing I do after I tell them who everybody is and who our mission, what our mission is, the very first thing I do in the bell schedule is talk about the code of conduct. Just in case they get tired halfway through reading, I know that this is at the front, this is at the top. I explain the levels. And again, I quote policies. It's in the policy manual, just like we just saw, policy 4303. I'm just pulling it from the district, not making it up. So I'm going to switch off now. Let's see, new share. Okay, so I've explained the trickle down from the State Board of Education all the way down to the actual school giving out their handbook with the code of conduct in the handbook. All the information should be the same, no matter what school you go in. The code of conduct, the general policies should be the same. Okay, so we're going to shift a little bit. We're going to talk about due process and making sure that due process is followed whenever you're having to deal with incidents. I have one case.
Before we go into due process, I have another question about behavior. So I know that there's a code of conduct, right? And you were saying that, like, if a student, you can't give a student suspension for a level 1. But now this is my question. So what if they have their repeat level 1 offender?
No.
You still can't, there is no.
The only thing that you can, that contributes, that they will allow a pattern in court is sexual misbehavior.
Okay.
That's the only one. Every incident has to stand on its own. There are some times when if the handbook says, you know, that's why there is a range within that level. You can't jump levels. So the range is, let's say level 1, the range is from a parent conference to 1 day of ISS. If they're repeat, you can use that 1 day of ISS. The first time they get a parent conference, but you can't jump to level 2 and give them an out of school. Nope, can't do that. The only time that you can jump levels, the only time that you can use a history or pattern is sexual behavior. But again, you don't investigate sexual behavior. So no, the answer would be no then.
And I asked that because, I mean, it makes it easier for me to explain that to the teachers, because they're feeling that administrators don't support them because this child sits in class, walks out of class every day, and all he gets is in-school suspension every time. You know, they're wondering, you know, when is the consequence going to be a little bit more severe for behavior?
It won't.
Thank you.
That's against the law to do that. It won't. And so, but you see, think about it. Think about our first case study. When I kept telling you, they took a kid's education for a whole year over him turning in his brother's homework. That's a bad look, folks. So what will hit the news is this kid walked out of class and they sent him home for 10 days. You can't legally jump levels. And also, even if you could, it's not a smart idea because it's a really bad PR move to do that. But it's against the law to do that, again, unless it's sexual. You can't jump levels. So all you can do is maximize. Now, because of exactly what you're talking about, Crystal, we put a number 9 in the code of conduct. And in Charlotte Mecklenburg, we put a number 9 in. What's a number 9, Dale? This ain't Subway or what's it, Jersey Mike's, where you order by number. We put a number 9, which was chronic and we would charge them with a number 9 and do a manifestation determination and do a hearing to see if we could give them more punishment, just like they were exceptional children, just like they were EC. We said maybe this is a bigger, deeper problem, so we did a 9 on them. We used to call it doing a 9. So if you had a kid that walked out, cursed everybody, walked out every day, we'd do a 9 on him, do a manifestation, just like he was EC. You know, basically that's an intervention referral. That's what that is. Remember, when you refer a kid to intervention for either behavior or academics, they get the same protections as if they were already EC. Well, that's what you do. What you're declaring is, we think there's something wrong with this kid. We're gonna refer him for intervention, do a 9. We're gonna do a manifestation determination, a functional behavior assessment, behavior intervention. But we're gonna do the whole 9 yards to see if he's got some disability. And that's what you can put one of those in your handbook. Now a lot of districts don't want to do that, but if it becomes a big enough problem, you can, if you can get the board to go along with it, the administration can recommend to your Board of Education to get them to adopt a number 9 chronic misbehavior. You can number it whatever you want to, but ours just happened to be 9. But that's the only caveat to that. But then your board would have to approve that. It would go in the next year's handbook, in the code of conduct. But now I'll just tell you, boards of education, because they're now partisan elections and their districts, even the school board's not, that they don't want to put a number 9 in, that chronic disruptive behavior. They don't want to do that. And because it generally ends up being racially identifiable. And basically it's like, every time a kid causes problems, we're going to label him special ed or put him in EC. That's a bad look. And so that has fallen out of the handbook right now. Again, that's an option that you have, but that's at the district level. But you know, I was able to get that done, but after my time in CMS, it evaporated pretty quickly. It's just a public relations nightmare to do a number 9 chronic misbehavior.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just to add, Crystal, talk to the staff. This, at the end of this current school year, well, this past school year, I had my staff to look at the consequences that were put in place, because that is an issue. That is a big concern. Students, you know, cussing at a teacher, walking out, or just being disrespectful, walking out. That's probably an issue in a lot of places. And the next day they're back in there, or a day after that, they're back in there. So make sure your staff knows the district's, your district's code of conduct with the levels, with the consequences that you as an administrator even have the power to implement. Let them see, you know, here, I cannot suspend Johnny for 5 days. It says it right here. This is the district's code of conduct that we will be following. So it kind of takes it off of you. They know where you're coming from. But my staff said, and they got creative. They got creative on some in-house consequences for the escalating levels. So if you know, of course, you can't suspend them, you know, 2 or 3 days if they keep walking out. You can't just do that. But there are some things that you can do in-house, especially if the teachers are creating it and they're on board and they're, you know, the buy-in is there and they're going to support it. Put it back on them. Tell them, you know, as long as it's not illegal and it makes sense and, you know, it's in the schools and the students' best interest, let's try it. And they will be creative and come up with some alternative forms of consequences that can take place in the school, since you cannot suspend them outside of the school. So that's just something to keep in mind.
I'm going to say something here, and I'm betting there's somebody on the screen. You don't have to raise your hand or say, yeah, I'm betting that there's a school, somebody is in the school right now that's breaking the law, because there's 2 things that you need to understand. There's two things. ABCs are illegal and therapeutic suspensions are illegal. What's an ABC, absence before conference, where you tell a kid that you got to go home and you have to stay until you bring a parent back because we're going to get to the bottom of this behavior? That's illegal. I know there's schools that still do it, but when you go to court, it will not go well for you. ABCs are illegal. Therapeutic suspensions are illegal, where you call the mama and say, come get Johnny, he's tearing the building up, and we'll just let you take him home the rest of the day, and nothing goes in power school. That's commonly referred to as a therapeutic suspension. Those are illegal as well. I'm just going to, now, you don't have to tell me if your school does either or both of those, but now I know a lot of schools do. But if you get caught, you used to work there.
Okay, so I have any other questions regarding the discipline, the code of conduct? All right, so we'll look at due process. There was a case, November 2022, the post came out. Florida State University Schools Incorporated, or FSUS, a public K-12 charter school, rescinded their decision to involuntarily withdraw a 6-year-old Latino student for allegedly throwing a tantrum, according to a settlement agreement. Okay, so in October 2022, the Southern Poverty Law Center, SPLC, appealed the school's decision to expel the student, stating that it violated the student's due process rights and was an excessive response to a routine disciplinary issue in which no one reported serious injury. They put that so eloquently in that statement. That's the statement that their lawyers put out. So the school accused the 6-year-old of hitting his physical education teacher for taking his Pokemon card. So he hit his teacher because the teacher took the card. While the appeal was pending, the counsel for the parties engaged in constructive settlement discussions, which resulted in a mutually agreeable resolution of this matter. The child was allowed back to school on November 7th as part of the agreement. So pretty much the student won. It was over, the suspension was overturned. The student was allowed to come back to school, but not only that, listen to what else happened. Okay, so FSUS, the school system, agreed to place the student in a different first grade classroom. They agreed to give him a different physical education teacher. They agreed that they would investigate whether the student was bullied. So that's another whole little branch off from the initial thing that we were talking about. They agreed to assess his needs for an individualized education plan, or IEP. They agreed to have their attorneys review the FSUS Student Code of Conduct to ensure that it adheres to the due process requirements. And they agreed that they would commit themselves to conduct a thorough review of the school's discipline policies and practices so that this does not happen again. So not only did the student win and he got to come back to school, there were so many other things put in place that the school and the school district had to implement immediately in order to make sure something like this did not happen again. So that is one example of how, if you don't have due process, or actually something that Dr. Lamb has mentioned before with the ruling, you have your substantive is what policies say, and then you have your procedural, what actually happens. So they're having them to look at their policies and procedures to see if what happened is actually, if they were actually adhering to their policies and procedures put in place. Because if they were, then they need to change their whole system. They need to change their whole policy and procedures, their whole code of conduct. So that's where they're going. They're looking at the school, but then they're looking at the district as well to see if any changes need to take place. Also, something else that Dr. Lamb has mentioned is capricious and arbitrary. So capricious, that was an extreme punishment, and the time did not fit the crime. To kick the kid out of school, according to what they're saying, for hitting a teacher. So an arbitrary is unfair, not consistent. Has this ever happened before? Has a student ever hit a teacher? And if so, what happened there? Were they also long-term, or did something else happen? Are these unreasonable consequences? And have they been in practice in this school district before now? So a lot of questions are coming up with this case. So you best believe the Southern Poverty Law Center is all over this case. And when they finish, that school district will have something in place to make sure that this does not happen again. They'll make sure of that.
You noticed when Dr. Griffin Jordan was scrolling through some of her materials earlier that in Durham public schools, and in Charlotte does the same thing, the big districts do it, they split their code of conduct into elementary and then secondary.
Mm-hmm.
This case she's talking about, I followed this case. If this kid had been 15 rather than 5, that might have been a legitimate response. What might not have been capricious. For a 15-year-old punches the teacher, but when a 5-year-old slaps the teacher, hits at the teacher, to put the kid out of school. So again, you got to make sure you know there's different consequences for different ages of kids. That factors into that arbitrary and capricious as well. The age of the kid, that's a factor. So don't just assume that do X, get Y. According to the handbook, what level they are, level the infraction is, and the age of the student, the infractions, the levels, the consequences vary by age as well. Charlotte Mecklenburg lost a lawsuit and had to do that as well. We used to have one code of conduct. When I got to central office, we had one. We had to split it in 2 for that very reason. Because we were unreasonable. We did not, the punishment didn't fit the crime for some of the elementary kids, especially lower elementary, that got the same as a high school senior would have gotten. That's an excellent point here. That was the capricious standard. This was because this kid was 5. Little much for a 5-year-old, don't you think, to be suspending them from school long term? Little much.
A very good point. Because if a 5-year-old pushes an adult and then an 18-year-old senior in high school pushes an adult, I'm thinking the outcome would be much different.
Yeah.
So yes, that's a very good point. We do have elementary and then secondary, which is middle and high school, all throughout. And that's another thing in Educator Handbook. They have all of that. It has L1E and then L1M/H. If you're high school and you mistakenly hit the L1E, that means you're given a level 1 elementary. You know, you've got to, as Dr. Lamb mentioned, you've got to look back over and make sure you're putting in the right information when it's rolled over to Power School. All those things matter. All right. Okay, so lastly, we're going to look at a scenario and discuss some of the things that will happen. All scenarios are different depending on the severity, who's involved, what took place. So for this one, you've been called to room 106. A teacher has reported a fight and the office radioed the incident. So you're getting it on the radio. So all of your critical people on your CERT team have a radio. So that means your SRO, any other administrators, your counselor, your custodian, any of your people that have to respond, your essential people have to respond immediately, they have a radio. So let's talk a little bit about that. So as soon as you get that call, what do? Everybody goes, you stop what you're doing and you go. When you arrive, of course, the SRO is going to be there and your other APs and your school counselor will be there. So let's look at roles. So AP, your principal, and the SRO, those are the ones in charge. Depending on what type of situation, let's say you get there and the students have separated, but they're still talking trash to each other. They're just mouthing off now. So for one, your administrators and SRO will work together. They're going to separate, make sure the students that are in conflict are separated and taken to isolated areas. You have to remember that the SRO, you are the lead as the administrator. The SRO is there to support you, not lead, unless there's a possible potential probability of an assault of any type that takes place. If you happen to see a weapon, a knife, if there's like blood or teeth on the floor or something crazy like that, then that probably more than likely will escalate into somebody maybe getting charged or something like that. You're going to let the SRO take anything that seems to be the possibility of an assault. He's going to step it up. For now, we're going to talk about just, there was like a little pushing, shoving going on. Okay, so once everybody's been separated, your teachers are going to clear the scene. They're going to, if it's happening in a classroom, the teachers need to take everybody out unless we're able to get those 2 students that were involved in the altercation out extremely quickly. Because sometimes they just don't want to go. They like the audience, so they want to stay in there. If they're refusing to leave, then quickly the teacher has to remove all the students and take them to a designated safe space. So either the class is going to move or the 2 or however many people involved will move quickly. So that's what the teacher will do. Your school counselors, they're there. They're going to scan the scene. They're going to pull students who are recording on their phones, have them look. There's always going to be somebody that has their phone out. That's where your counselors are going to come in. You're going to pull those students. You're going to pull the friends. You're going to pull anybody that has knowledge of the incident, because those are going to be your witnesses. As the administrator, you were not there when it started. You're going to have to rely on witness statements from your teacher, the actual people involved, and then those in the surrounding area. Your custodians are there. They're going to clean the scene. They're going to make sure the furniture, all the equipment is cleaned, wiped down. There's no blood or bodily fluids anywhere. They're going to make sure the space is conducive again for learning. So these are people that are on your crisis response team. So whether it is an in-house crisis like a fight or a school community crisis like a bomb threat or some type of natural disaster, be sure that your team knows what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. You don't need to come to any type of situation in your school and pause, hesitate, stumble, look around and not know what to do. You've got to always know immediately what to do, and everyone that's on your team should know what to do. So immediate actions. All right, so you're going to assess the incident when you get there. Do you need to call 911? Do you need your SRO, if they're there, to step in, look at the incident, assess your injuries? Do you need EMS? Do you need to call an ambulance? Is there an ice pack or bandage needed? Contact the parents, and you're going to take statements. All right. So once the students are separated and everything is calm, you've separated them, you have the counselors with other students to get their statements, you're going to have your front office to contact your parents, the parents of the students, What mine says is Mr. and Mrs. Jones, please come to City of Medicine Academy. Your student has been involved in an altercation and the principal would like to meet with you. That's all they say. No other names of other students. No, well, I'm not sure. It looks like there was blood on the floor, but that's all they say. And we wait till the parent gets there. They know that they were involved in an altercation. That's it until they get there, because you don't know what else really happened. At this point, you are on an accelerated timeline because some parents are going to go 110 miles per hour to get there and will be there by the time the person gets off the phone. They're going to want immediate, especially if their child suffered in any kind of way, they're going to want immediate answers. So you're on an accelerated timeline now to complete the investigation, if you're doing the investigation. If it's something escalated that the SRO or law enforcement has taken over, then that's off of you. You're then the support. You're making sure you get the statements for them because there was a gun involved and whatever was involved. You're then helping to get all the information gathered. The parent will have to wait. That's law enforcement. I'm sure the law enforcement officer, when the parents get there, will brief them in their own way. So that's the two differences, just depending on what type of situation, what type of incident you have. Anybody that was involved in the incident, as well as the witnesses, including your staff members, including the teacher that witnessed it, they all need to write statements. My district has a statement form to make sure everything is up there. Their name, their grade level, the time, the date, and they sign at the bottom. Make sure everyone that saw and knows something about it. Friends are good because friends they will be able to tell you what happened right before. They'll be able to tell you, well, last night at 10 o'clock, we were on the phone and she said that she was going to probably get him in third period. All that stuff matters. So grab everybody that knows something about the incident for your investigation. Okay, so the heart of your investigation, of course, is your statements. That's your witness statements. And you have to remember that you were not there, so you're really relying on the witness statements. All of this that I'm talking about is a part of the student's due process. You cannot send a student home for 10 days without doing this. You don't know what happened. You've got to give them a chance to tell their story. Right, wrong, or indifferent, they need their time. Just like you go to trial, they get on the witness stand if they want to, and they talk. Whether we know if they killed somebody or not, they still get to get on the witness stand if they want to. So same here. We know that they fought. They still need that time to write their statement, to tell their story, and evidence gathered and reviewed before any type of consequences is delivered. Okay, so also, if it's an incident that happened in a hallway or out in the lobby area, there probably will be video footage. Video footage is always good when a student says, you know, I didn't hit him first, and then you can look on the video and clearly see that he hit him first. That's something that you can use in your investigation. However, parents cannot see that. Parents cannot see other students in a video, and most likely if two people are fighting, there are two people in the video. So even if the parent requests to see that video, you cannot allow the parent to see the video. Please don't do that. If they appeal to the district, then the district, let them decide if and how the parent will be able to access the video in some type of appeal if a parent appeals over you. But according to your duties, you do not let parents view the video. All right, so we're going down. We've collected and reviewed the statements. We've reviewed the video if it's available, and we've reported it. If it's an incident that needs to be reported to law enforcement. If you are privileged to have an SRO or an off-duty officer at your school, that's half the battle, because you don't have to wait for law enforcement to come. They're there, and it's very helpful. You're going to report it to your district, and of course, you're going to report it to your parent. If it's something that is an extreme situation that involves a weapon of some type, then yes, if you don't have a law enforcement, your very first call is going to be 911. You're going to call, and then you're going to let your district people know what happened. As you're doing your investigation. Okay. Any questions about handling incidents?
I
If
have
you get,
a
okay.
couple of things. Alex had a good question in the chat. Is a teacher's written referral considered a witness statement? Yes, it's a legal document, and you've got to coach your teachers not to editorialize on those things or say things that they think or that are derogatory toward the kid. That kid's always been a pain in my behind. Today he did this, that kind of stuff. So yes, those you got to coach and work with your teachers on writing their referrals when they're involved in something like this, because they are the key piece of evidence in the due process chain. It starts with a referral. And it can't have editorializing or derogatory or folks, I've seen it all. I've seen racial things. I mean, ugly stuff. You got to understand that. You got to coach your teachers on how to write a referral. But yes, the referral becomes it is the key piece of evidence. It is the key piece. FERPA law says parents, you remember back to FERPA. FERPA says they can't watch the video. Remember your laws again. Now, your district can redact faces or do the blanks over the faces, but let them do that. But looking at this scenario, I'm going to talk some advanced stuff now. This is advanced, some advanced due process stuff here. You probably won't remember it, but hopefully it will trigger some things to ask some people later down the road. Because this happened in the classroom, it's not an affray, A-F-F-R-A-Y. An affray is a public fight. If this had occurred in the cafeteria, a hallway, a gym, or a playground where there were more than 45 students, the police would need to be involved, because that's called public affray. More than 45 students in a big open area like I just named, that is a violation of the law. So yeah, your SRO's got to be involved, because public affray is a violation of the penal code. A fight in the classroom with 2 students is not that. But a fight can only occur between an even number of students. Let me say that again. A fight can only occur among an even number of students. If it's 2 or 1 on 1, that's 3. That's an assault. That's not a fight. Again, your SRO needs to be there. And that's why you need them there, even though you say, well, this is a fight in the classroom. Why do we need the SRO? Might be a weapon, might be a serious injury, could have been an assault that predicated the fight. Could be 2 or more on 1. You don't know. So that's why your SRO is there. We're not asking the SRO to do our discipline for us, but we're going to make sure that we don't cover up violations of the law, because the victim's going to sue, and then we're going to get skint if we didn't have police there. And it's determined in court that a violation of the law did happen. Oh, we're hosed then, folks. And we didn't call for the police, we're in trouble. Better to have them and not need them than need them and not have them. And that leads to one of the discussions this week. Probable cause versus reasonable suspicion. The administrative standard for us is just reasonable suspicion, and we can search a kid. Policeman's got to have probable cause. But as I told you last week, the reason why when we're involved with cyberbullying and things like that, we're at an advantage when it comes to a search, but we want a policeman there in case we find something illegal. We can hand it to them. We can't take possession of it ourselves. But so we're an advantage when it comes to search, but we're at a disadvantage as well because we don't have warrant powers like for a cell phone to get the records of those kinds of things. So the point of that story is have your resource officer there, but know your role and know their role and what they're there for. They're not there to do discipline. They're there in case a violation of the penal code, a law was broken. You're there to handle the disciplinary situation. Now, that reverses on something like a cell phone is there and you suspect cyberbullying or sexting or blackmail or something like that. They now have the warrant powers. They can take that, they can confiscate that and get a warrant and open it up and look at it where you cannot. So again, everybody's got to know their role. But again, better safe than sorry. Call the law, have them there. I know schools that intentionally make sure that they, go to another channel so the SRO won't hear it. That is dumb. You're just asking to lose your house. You're just asking to lose your house. So this is a perfect scenario to get into those things. But again, you've got to understand what your role is as a school administrator and what theirs is as a law enforcement officer. You need to work with them, not against them ever.
And our school resource officers are wonderful. They're there sometimes before I get there. They're always there. They're always like ready to whatever's needed. They're ready. I love it when I love the fact that if we do have some type of medical situation, 911, you're supposed to call immediately to get an ambulance or whatever. They can call right there. I don't have to go to a phone. I don't have to call my front office. They can get on the radio and radio for an ambulance to come. So then while they're doing that, I can be calling the parent and the district. So everything is happening like within 10 seconds of each other. It's really good to have. And I know everybody, some SROs are shared between schools, but they have been nothing but a blessing to us. So yes, I use their services. They're there to support. They don't run up and take over and pull students apart. That's not their job. They're there and they're waiting for me to let them know what I need for them to do. And it's amazing. Unless, of course, there's a weapon or something serious, even like with drugs. If drugs are caught, I call them in immediately. And they are a part of that situation. From the time I see the weed till the end, they're a part because they have to report that as well. They have to
and
do
they
their
have to
part.
take that into evidence, by the way.
Yes,
You
they do.
cannot. But you could be charged with possession. If you take a gun, a knife, drugs, you are not law enforcement. Do not be confiscating that stuff off kids and sticking it in your desk. That's a very dumb thing to do. Make sure law enforcement is there to take it into custody.
Yeah. Okay. So that was, I think that was, oh, we have one more slide. So this is just, we've talked about educator handbook. This is how we input a new incident. And again, everything is rolled over. It has to be exported to PowerSchool. Office referrals. These are the fights, the report of violence, drugs, weapons. Those are the office referrals that we deal with. Extreme disruptions. Minor incidents. I've told my staff, put minor incidents in because educator handbook is wonderful when you're meeting with parents or when you're trying to devise a behavior contract of some sort. They give you statistics on each student. They give you statistics on your school, the time of day that most infractions occur, or the day of the week that most infractions occur. So not only does it export to PowerSchool, but as you're looking down, you have to do all of this before it's saved in the system. You have to choose the location. Was it the cafeteria and bathroom? The subject, is it a specific subject? Is it an arrangement? What type of arrangement? Was it transition? or was it homeroom? Lunchtime, what type of arrangement? Choose the offense, what exactly happened. You have to provide the description. This is what Dr. Lamb was talking about, where the teacher can actually go in and write in the description, but please remind them that this description is what's going to go into that big write-up for that suspension. That's going to be a part of the office referral and a part of their suspension paperwork. So train your teachers on how to be very, very objective in what they're saying. Educator handbook will redact the names of other students, but I always err on the side of caution and just don't put, the other student's name. Just put, some of them will put student A and student B. Some of them will put the student that we're talking about, but then when they're referring to the other student, they will just list other student. So that's, just in case the redaction, something goes wrong, we don't want a name in there. So all of these things go into the system, and then you can determine how to best support your school. We're going to look at the data from this school year as we get ready for next school year. And, if there's a specific, we have an enrichment period. Are most of the incidents happening during our enrichment period? If so, then, is this the time of day where there's the least supervision? There are things that you can do to be proactive to prepare for your next year with things that Educator Handbook and other softwares, can provide to you. So that's something that you can consider as well. And that will be it. Any questions about code of conduct, student rights, due process?
Okay, great job, Dr. Griffin Jordan. Again, I have that under tonight's lesson. Make sure that you know that reporting manual inside and out. It is long and involved, but you've got to know that stuff. I'm going to tell a quick story. I told you when I was principal up in Burke County, I had a teacher when I got there. She was in her 47th year of teaching, and she was a wonderful lady, just magnificent. I loved her, Miss Davis. She started her career in segregated schools, and she was just the most wonderful person. There's no but coming here, but she wrote my favorite referral of all time. Now it was okay in Burke County, but in Charlotte we'd have got beat down over it. And she wrote the referral about this little boy. I think his name was Jimmy. She said he acts just like his daddy did when he was that age. Can't do stuff like that on referrals. You got to work with your teachers. Now, Miss Davis was the loveliest person, and she didn't mean to be ugly. She was kind of taken up for him, that he got it honestly, his behavior. But those kinds of things, when you go to court, do not play well. I've seen some really bad stuff in Charlotte that we just couldn't defend it in court, folks. That was on teachers' referrals. You've got to work with your faculty on, because that's the linchpin to the whole due process evidence chain, is that teacher's referral. If it's bad or unusable or publicly embarrassing or whatever, we don't stand a chance. You got to make sure you understand that. That's kind of the key of the whole thing. So that was a great question by Alex. I wanted to make sure I recognized our stars of the week on our evidence work from the CAP. That'd be Treva, Larissa, and Kashona. They're already. Larissa's already finished the CAP, and Treva and Kashona, so they're out front leading the way on that. So I want to make sure I shouted them out, as well as our other folks, Michelle, Daniel, and Sharon, for doing a great job on our 5 and 6 activities. I want to talk to you about the case study that's going to be due. Now, remember, next week we're off for the 4th, because it is the 4th. The following week, you'll do your case study presentation as number 3. As I told you, our first case study was a case of negligence based on malpractice or malfeasance. She intentionally did the wrong thing. Last case study was misfeasance. He did the wrong thing, didn't know it was the wrong thing, but it was still the wrong thing. Now, the one that we've got coming up has all three. Has all three in it. The first, non-feasance, she ignored the public display of affection, the PDA, and it got out of control between 2 gay kids, which caused the community uproar. Then she, the misfeasance, she tried to punish them. She didn't know it was wrong, but that was the wrong thing to do. She tried to, ban them from the prom rather than and then the malfeasance is she basically threatened them. Heckler's veto. If you come, I can't protect you, and they're gonna beat you up, kind of thing. So this is a case where it all went bad, all three. And then our last case will be a case of nonfeasance again, where the principal had a duty and responsibility to act and supervise her school, and she had totally abdicated that responsibility. But understand that. Make sure you look at Heckler's veto. What is that? That's when basically you allow one group to bully the other based on if we let you exercise your rights, then these people are going to hurt you. So we're going to punish you for their bad behavior. That's what Heckler's veto is. Look at that one. Make sure you research this one well on all three functions of negligence, misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. Make sure you understand those standards of what this principal did and understand the bigger context of this case. Now, I'm going to say something now that sounds completely stupid. So this case is not really about LGBTQ. It's not about them. It's about any protected class of students. It could be EC, it could be second language, any group that has federal protections would fall under the same category as this one. But understand what started this. This is an example of the little things becoming the big things, antecedent behaviors. This was started by not addressing public displays of affection from any kids. And of course, that incited an entire community when 2 gay kids started doing it. And so there's several things here. Anecdote, again, antecedent behaviors, Heckler's veto, all 3 standards of negligence, veil threat, which in the law basically is I'm not saying that I'm going to beat you up, but somebody else is if you continue this behavior, those kinds of things. It also basically, she tried, could you not be gay for another couple months till school's out? That'd be like asking an EC kid, could you not be, exceptional child, or could you learn the language for the next couple of months if you're, second language kid? It's the same thing. So that's the case for next time. Again, we won't be on next week because obviously it's the 4th of July holiday. The week following with your case study, we'll have one more night of class, and then our final week will be your last case study. Make sure that you're monitoring your progress toward getting your evidences. We need the OMA and the SCIP this summer. You don't have to do the CAP or the SIP. We got people who are, I think Marissa's already finished both of them. We can go on those, and you can work. I'll work with you individually, but let's focus on getting all of our activities done, working our collaborative teams on our case studies, and make sure that we finish at least the OMA and the SCIP. So it's break time, it's vacation time. I hope you all travel safely and have a big time on your break, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you again,
Bye,
Dr. Griffin.
everybody.
Excellent job tonight.